مساء الخير جميعا. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our artist talk. It's my pleasure to welcome our panelists for today. Before we begin, just a couple quick mentions. There is live translation for all presentations in English and speakers were speaking in English. We have live translation into Arabic. You can get your headphones. In the following Q&A, please feel free to ask your questions in either Arabic or English. As we said, we have full translation. Following this panel this evening, so without further ado, I'm going to pass on the mic to Mariam Ajraoui, who will be moderating the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Livia. I don't know if you are hearing me. No?
It's getting better.
Now? Okay. I will do this presentation in Arabic. مرحبا بكم في هذا الحوار from moving images to immersive cinema أو بالعربية من الصور المتحركة إلى السينما الغامرة. سعيدة جدا بتواجدي في الرياض في هذا المؤتمر وفي الرياض لأول مرة. وكنت سعيدة جدا عندما ليفيا اقترحت علي ما عندكم you don't have the you don't need it.
Oh, I do need
it's okay, it's only the presentation, you know yourself. كنت سعيدة جدا عندما ليفيا اقترحت علي أن أقدم الفنانات اللي حاضرين معنا اليوم لأنه عادة أنا يعني بشتغل عن السينما بين قوسين الكلاسيكية وخصوصا عن السينما المغربية وفي اليوم في هذا المؤتمر عندنا يعني opportunity أو chance إنه نفتح مجال السينما عن مجالات فنية أخرى وتكنولوجيا أخرى، والفنانات اللي حاضرين معنا عندهم هاي يعني بيشتغلوا عن السينما الكلاسيكية والسينما اللي بتستعمل تكنولوجيا حديثة. فاليوم عندنا هاي يعني البوسيبيليتي اننا نتحدث معهم عن هاي الالتقاء ما بين هاي المجالين. فهلا راح اقدم الفنانات وبعد ذلك نستمع لعروضهم وبعد ذلك فينا نسألهم بالعربية أو بالإنجليزية. فالفنانات اللي معنا اليوم بيشتغلوا كثنائيين، يعني ثنائي وثنائي. راح ابتدأ بالثنائي الأول إيمي روز ومي عبد الله. إيمي روز هي مخرجة وصانعة أفلام معروفة بأعمالها في السرد القصصي الحسي وتجربتها للتقنيات الجديدة. حصلت على درجة الماجستير في الفنون الجميلة في الإخراج من كلية إدنبرغ للفنون، وعملت كمخرجة أفلام وثائقية. أسست عام 2013 بالشراكة مع مي عبد الله استوديو أناغرام المتخصص في سرد القصص الواقعية باستخدام التقنيات الإبداعية والغامرة وإشراك الجمهور. حصلت أعمالها مثل المصادم أو The Collider اللي هو يعني في إمكانكم إنكم تزوروه هنا في المتحف على عدة جوائز دولية. مي عبد الله هي مخرجة وفنانة مرموقة ومعروفة بتجربتها الجسدية واستخدام التكنولوجيا والسرد القصصي بطرق مبتكرة. تخرجت من جامعة كامبريدج وقد قامت بإخراج أفلام وثائقية تعتمد على الشخصيات ودوافعها في السرد. في عام 2012 أسست مع إيمي روز استوديو أناغرام، وتعاونت مي عبد الله مع كذلك المخرج باري جين ميرفي في فيلم بالعربية جالوت اللعب بالواقع الذي فاز بجائزة لجنة التحكيم الكبرى في مهرجان البندقية السينمائي لأفضل عمل واقع افتراضي في عام 2021. والثنائي الثاني هو لايا كابريرا وإيزابيل دوفيرجي. لايا كابريرا هي مخرجة أفلام وفنانة فيديو مقيمة في نيويورك، تعمل في مجال الفن التركيبي والسينما الجديدة. يتمحور عملها حول استكشاف طرق جديدة لاستخدام الفضاء والخيال البصري كأدوات السرد والتواصل مع الجمهور. تدمج في أعمالها الفنون السينمائية والرقص والموسيقى والمسرح، بالإضافة إلى الفنون الرقمية والتفاعلية. تعاونت كابريرا مع إيزابيل دوفيرجي في تأسيس شركة لايا كابريرا شركاؤها لايا كابريرا أند كو، والتي أنتجت فيلم الآن أو The Now، حيث يعتبر هذا الفيلم الرقمي تفاعلي يبلغ طوله 72 قدماً. عرض في محطة حافلات بورت أوتوريتي في تايم سكوير في نيويورك. وأخيراً إيزابيل دوفيرجي هي فنانة بصرية من فرنسا تعيش في نيويورك. تعرض لوحاتها وتركيباتها التفاعلية والغامرة في مختلف أنحاء الولايات المتحدة وآسيا وكذلك أوروبا، بما في ذلك أماكن مثل كاتدرائية القديس يوحنا الإلهية أو بالإنجليزية سانت جون ذا ديفاين كاتدرال في نيويورك، وفابرا اي كوتس في برشلونة، وقاعة مدينة هونغ كونغ أو بالإنجليزي هونغ كونغ سيتي هول. تقوم إيزابيل دوفيرجي بإنتاج فنها في الأماكن العامة باستخدام تقنية البروجيكشن مابين وبروجيكشن آرت على المباني وفي المسارح وفي عروض الرقص والفيديو وكذلك الرسوم المتحركة. فالآن سنستمع إلى عروض الفنانات، وبعد ذلك فينا نطرح بعض الأسئلة.
Do you want us to leave the stage?
I'm just going to click.
Yeah, you need. C'est pas toi qui l'as?
Good evening, everyone.
It's not doing anything.
Ah, just wait.
In a moment, our presentation will begin. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much, Livia, for inviting us. Next slide. Okay, so as Mariam introduced us, myself and Amy co-founded Experiential Immersive Studio, which is two words which are difficult to explain next to each other, called Anagram, 10 years ago. And our background is film, and we love kind of storytelling that can take you extremely far down a journey. But our medium is something that we really kind of is like the human body. So what we were interested in doing is making lots of different kinds of experiences. Sometimes they're in very constructed environments, sometimes they're out in the wild, sometimes they are completely kind of, you're in a big group or you're by yourself. But the kind of key thing is we're always asking the question, what is the interaction? So we talk a lot about interactive work. However, the interactions we're interested in are not necessarily interactions that have to be facilitated by a computer. They are just interactions that two people can be doing or one person can be doing. And how does the way that you act in a story reveal something in that story that becomes part of the story? So how can what you do be this other platform that the story happens on? And so, as mentioned, we're here with the piece, The Collider, which we actually started making, I think we just remembered, in 2016. And it's a piece about control, really, to put it kind of as simply as possible. It's quite a complex experience. It is, it's multi-room installation. Two people do it at the same time, but they both one person has one side of an experience and the other has the other side, and neither really know what the full experience is. So the kind of idea, well, let's say the science fiction of this experience is that the collider, al-Mosadim, has been built by a group of scientists. It's not unlike the collider that is in Geneva, which has been built to throw particles at each other to divine what is inside the atom. But this collider, this fringe collider, throws humans at each other in order to understand what is the material which is also invisible that pulls us together, pushes us apart. And so the story is kind of almost absurd, but they take it very seriously. And you are just another person on the journey of this box. You are just data. And that is why that you are there. And so Amy will talk a little bit more about the story.
Before I go into more detail about what happens, and to give you a bit of a taste but not give too much away, in this context, the exhibition itself shows different kinds of work that we could call immersive or interactive. And there's a few pieces that use virtual reality, and ours is one of those pieces. But you might notice if you go into the exhibition and try all the pieces on offer, that unusually our piece, you only put on the headset when you're in the middle of the experience, and the end of the experience happens after you take it off. So for us, contextualizing this tool, this bit of machinery, amongst other things. Our friend from the build is here.
I'm glad you came.
I played with her a lot in the last week, and now she's come to listen to our talk. There's a cat at the front if you haven't seen her. The point of placing this piece of machinery right in the middle of this journey is that it allows you to warm up into a particular state of mind. It allows you to kind of arrive in a place where you are ready to do something. And sometimes if you're new to VR or any other piece of machinery or technology, we could say, when you look at it for the first time, it could be many things. There are many metaphors at play in your experience. And what we've done is that we've made this particular metaphor of this machine contextualize the VR in a particular way. So it's been in a variety of places, and one of those places was at Venice Film Festival in 2019, where it was selected as part of the best of VR of that year globally. And what you see when you first approach is a quite sort of, let's say, mysterious white wall with 3 doors in it. And there is really not very much information on the outside. Sometimes people ask us why we don't tell people a bit more before they begin. And really the point is to say, you know, there is something inside here. You have to elect to be involved. You have to choose to participate. But you know that you don't really know what's going to happen. So there is a kind of contract that is established with the audience at the beginning of a certain amount of mystery. And for us, this is a kind of theatrical move. This is something where we don't really want to give it all away, and we want to feed you the information at exactly the right pace, bit by bit, so that once you're inside, you're going at a kind of careful, steady pace.
So, and the first scene is almost, if the rooms are in a way much like chapters or scenes of a film, the first scene, both individuals are in a different room. They don't see each other. In fact, they never really make eye contact until the end, and we'll talk about that. And they're asked to critically kind of prepare a memory, and the memory that the person on the right-hand side is preparing is a memory where they have been in a position where they were in control of someone else. They had power over someone else. They realized that for whatever reason, this person was going to do what they told them, and there's a moment that they realized that that was something that they had capacity to do. And then in the other room, there's a moment where the person is asked to think of a moment in their own lives where they were under the power of someone else, that they perhaps wanted to leave but couldn't. They kind of realized that that this material, this fantastical material that the Collider is looking for, was particularly strong. And so the Collider, the scientists, they just are trying to get people to think of these moments so that when they go into the machine, those moments are fresh. But for us, it's also, like Amy was saying, you know, when you edit a film, you know the moments where people can be ready to think and feel. And so that kind of physical space edit, and I hope many of you get a chance to see it, is kind of part of that narrative journey.
Is it me now? So in the heart of the machine, you enter a strange space, which is slightly reminiscent of Twin Peaks, if anyone's seen it. David Lynch is kind of somewhere in the room somehow.
Islamic Twin Peaks.
And in it, at first, one person enters, they enter alone, and they put on the headset, and they are alone. And then the other person enters, and a game starts to evolve where the person who's holding the controllers, you can see in that picture, effectively becomes the puppeteer of the other person. So they're invited to lead them around, and basically it becomes a dance where one person has control and the other person has control, and you're really trying to mirror each other. And there's a moment when the person who's wearing the headset realizes, and this is different for every person, they realize that what they can see is being controlled by another person, not by a computer. And it's that moment of realization that you are, in fact, this close to somebody else, and you didn't know they came in the room, you didn't know that they were going to come in the room, that kind of gives you this rush in your body, this sort of, when sometimes maybe the hairs pick up on the back of your neck and you know that somebody is close to you, that we were very interested in that moment. And then what happens after that, well, you sort of have to do it yourself, but we'll keep going. You were going to say something else about that.
Yeah, I talked about it. So, this is a very playful moment, this kind of puppeteering moment, and it's, lots of laughter, sometimes singing, sometimes none. And so, so just for those people who don't know how VR works, the controllers that the person is holding will affect what the person who is wearing a headset will see, just in case that wasn't obvious. And so then there's another moment where one person is asked to remember their memory that they put in the first room and arrange the person who they're with like a proxy for the second person, to arrange them into the same position physically, whether they are on a chair, just to kind of beckon in three-dimensional, one-to-one scale space this moment. And they both have different perspectives of what is happening in that moment, but then they are asked to say something that they would have said in that moment had they had the clarity that they do now, that time has passed. So those are some different kind of beats that take place. And then another moment, which I'm just going to introduce before you press next in case the video starts playing, that we're really interested in. And what I find always interesting is, we often get put into this kind of interactive work genre. And then some people say, oh, well, actually, this is a bit too interactive. You're asking people to do quite a lot. And I think we've always thought, it's not interactive unless if I stop participating, it breaks. That's kind of the level. And so, I think people are given quite a lot of agency in this piece. And there is a moment where the person, we're really interested about how proximity to someone who is vulnerable affects you. What does it make you feel if you're near someone who in this instance doesn't know who you are or how far away you are or that you're even there? So there is a moment when the person outside holding the controllers is asked to open the filing cabinet, and inside the filing cabinet are a number of different tools that could be used in different ways. And they're meant to consider what they might do. So what we're going to do is just play kind of, you're never filmed in the Collider. There is a security camera just for safety, but it's not meant to be a performance. People aren't observed. But we have permission just to show you a little snippet of just two normal people who are in there, I believe in Belgium at some point, just so you can see the moment from what two people are hearing at the same time.
Yeah, so I'll play the first one.
Maybe you have to click twice after all.
Take one out and consider it carefully. What is this thing used for? And what could it be used for? What is the worst thing you could do with this object?
So this is what the person holding the feather boa can hear.
What if you take something and hold it near your partner just for a moment? Does something change in the air between you? You have the power to alter the shape and feel of that delicate space between you with one touch, deftly delivered.
And then this is what the other person hears at exactly the same time.
It appears for reasons we have...
Oh? Sorry.
Just wait a minute.
It appears for reasons we have not yet been able to understand that when two people collide, there is usually a kind of struggle. Not always apparent on the outside, but visible at the level of detail that we investigate. We need you, for a few moments, to be very still and receptive. The material connects from your outer edges. Concentrate on those. You are likely to feel contact. Try and hone your attention. Do you back away? Or lean in for more?
So for us, really the whole piece is kind of driving towards this moment at the end where you've experienced very different things from very different positions, but you've been very close to each other. And it's that navigation of difference between us that the piece is trying to get into and find almost a kind of perfect little metaphorical situation in which you can play that out. Because it's something that I'm sure is familiar to many, that sense of, we were both in this place together, but I thought it went like this and you thought it went like that, and how do we begin to bridge that divide? And this moment at the end kind of provides you with that opportunity. I think we're probably close to, can we get a time check? Or?
Do you want to trouble the machine? Why don't you just trouble the machine?
We have an hour.
Okay. So I'm not sure of everybody's familiarity with VR in this space, and maybe I'll assume that it's fairly new in this city, but maybe that's wrong, so please correct me if I'm wrong. But this is the kind of picture you might see on the left-hand side. Most often when you think about VR, you might see a person wearing a headset, holding the controllers by themselves. And when we made this piece, what we were interested in was kind of messing with the machinery, if you like. We wanted to kind of look at it and think, what is this thing? What is it supposed to be used for? But what could it be used for if we tried to think outside of the box that the men, and let's face it was the men who designed it, decided to say that it was for? So instead of it being for one person, in a way, it becomes the tool with which you communicate with the person next to you. And it's very important that the person on the left-hand side is blindfolded to the degree that they don't know what's around them, but they can see this kind of beautiful world. And the person on the right-hand side can't see that beautiful world, but they can see this person and they can lead them around. So to some degree, both are handicapped. Both have something that the other one doesn't have, and both want something that the other person has. And so this tension that's created by breaking it apart in this way creates that divide. May, did you want to say anything about that? There's a very beautiful, oh no, it's disguised.
No, that's fine. Let's go on Arabic.
Yeah, but I need to read it.
Could you read it out in Arabic?
Yeah.
I can read it on my phone. Hang on. That's quite
This
funny.
is a very beautiful little extract.
It's
Oh,
working.
gone.
You can
okay,
read it.
there you go.
Amy.
It's on.
Oh yeah, thanks. So this is from a very famous piece called "Will the Real Body Please Stand Up?" And the piece is exploring changes in technology over time. I really recommend it. And she writes, "When the dryer begins to beep complainingly from the laundry room, while I'm at dinner with friends, we raise eyebrows at each other and say simultaneously, 'The machines are restless tonight.'" And it says something for me about the relationship that we have with technology and that changing relationship with technology. and who they become if we live with them, really. Who these devices become. And VR has begun to have an identity in the world in which we live that and there will be people who are controlling the development of that identity, who are deciding, this is what it is, this is what it's for. And to some degree, the Collider was our attempt to say, well, what if it's for something else? And how could we start to take this thing apart and challenge the notion of how technology is designed and kind of inch it towards something other than what is imagined by those who designed it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we need you have
Clicker.
the...
Okay, so...
Is it working?
Hello?
Okay, yeah. All right. So, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. We're very happy and humbled to be invited. So, this is Laia Cabrera. I'm Isabelle Duverger. And we wanted to show you first, before starting to speak, a piece that we just finished and presented 2 weeks ago. And it kind of will give you a sense of also what is our cinematic language. And it's an immersive, large-scale video and sound installation that we presented in New York. So, just go ahead.
Hi, then we wanted to show you that clip mostly because we're coming from the film and the visual art scene, and it's very important for us, like the visual storytelling and how do we work in the poetics of language. And our interest to go to immersiveness and interactivity came mostly for the idea that how can we evolve in this language and how can we bring a different dialogue with the audience, and then that's why we're saying here that we explore new ways of using the space and the vision as a tool of narrative and audience connection. Basically because from the very beginning, like the work of in film, or you can go fast with that, and sort of like the more traditional video installations and everything, it was needed for us to be able to explore more like the feelings, and we're interested in concept of the otherness and the relationship to the other, and how the emotions and notions also of identity, as they were mentioning as well. And we found that going sort of being beyond the frame, going out of the traditional kind of discourse and the dramaturgical elements, was a way for us to really trigger our imagination and be able to find ways to tell our stories in a different way. That's why I mean, we work a lot with creating these kind of impossible images. I mean, we're fascinated with rendering kind of like spaces of truly like kind of either hyper-realistic or like almost to a poetic level. Actually, initially I started writing as a poet, and then it became the idea of working in film. Isabelle is a visual artist, an animator, an illustrator, and a painter. And we wanted, I mean, we had been working for more than 15 years right now, And anyway, that was very important for us. And the piece that we're presenting here at this festival, which is a 360 degrees video installation, because we work with large format projections. We like the idea of layering and creating kind of like dialogues, juxtaposition, composition, because that kind of creates another kind of, you can tell stories in a different way. I mean, film is about time, and therefore, maybe you can go to the next per second.
I'm sorry, but
That's, I wanted to show you that we were fascinated with the idea of expanded cinema. Our background has been also a lot in collaborations in theater and dance and other kind of production of performing arts. And here, for example, those are images of like multimedia shows that we created that were like an hour long, and then we had a live orchestra and a whole sort of feature film, but that we wanted to take it away of the traditional canvas and put it in an architectural context, or finding ways to layer the narrative, the storyline. And, or like, for example, you know, video installations that take place in public spaces or in galleries, looking always for the immersiveness. Not always with interactivity, but so far the last 5 pieces, we were digging into how can we bring to this more poetic, filmic language. Everything that we do is cinematic, we film it, it's like real footage. How can we bring the interactive element? How can we bring the experienceability to the audience, no? Then, maybe, those are like images of for example, this latest project that has been presented and like in this kind of big format and dividing the screen in several layers. And therefore, we're landing into interactivity, and I'm going to let Isabelle right now sort of put a little bit the grounds for it.
So one of the need that we had with our pieces is to make the audience more and more involved in the work. So we worked with immersiveness, with projection mapping. We worked a lot with theater, immersive theater. But we always wanted to add the interactivity, so this is one of our pieces that we created, Illusion. But so that has been an intent for many years until actually technology was available to us to be able to start working. So one of the first pieces that we actually work with was not motion tracking. I don't know if anyone saw the installation. We are actually presenting Dream-e-scape here during the next few days. But so this is the first installation that we did, and at the time we did it with conductive paint. So the idea was to touch the art, and it was based on the idea of surveillance in the 21st century and how we are getting accustomed to be constantly under cameras. And so this is based on a tale that is called The Elf on the Shelf, which is basically an elf that comes to you around the holidays to be able to control your behavior and make sure that you're well behaved, so then you can get presents. And you cannot touch it, and every night it leaves you and it goes to report, and it comes back to the room in a different place. So the idea is that in this piece there was a lot of objects that could be touched, but you could not touch the elf. Otherwise, a nightmarish vision would happen. So there were different scenarios, and we projected on a real children's bedroom all the elements. And there was one of them that was a mirror, and when you would touch the mirror, all of a sudden you would have like a video camera pointed at you that you could not locate. So you really had that feeling of surveillance. So this was the first piece that we did, and then we moved to motion tracking. This is a piece that was in Times Square. It was a public art piece, which was very interesting because we had people from all, there was no explanation, and people were just passing by and then realizing that it was interactive, which was brand new because no one had done a public art interactive installation in New York before like that.
Plus we had a lot of handicaps because for safety the cameras had to be behind the screens.
Yes.
And also it's like, how do you create the language, no? Like there was like a huge thing, and was our first kind of like dialogue, no, with understanding how can you create narratives and people are going to understand that they're interactive.
Right. And it was also motion tracking, which is what we've been using ever since in the piece that we're presenting here now. So do you want
which we're going to explain a little bit. This is like a video installation that we wanted, it's not the first time that we thought that the idea of a portal or like doors or like sort of create like this idea of layering was like a perfect excuse to be able to engage people in discovering other worlds or other sort of like fantastic realms or dreamlands. Then here is an installation that basically invites you to participate and to enter in this sort of waiting room, which is kind of idea to replicate kind of like a realism, some space that you recognize that it may be familiar. And then every time you have kind of a key that unlocks and allows you to see some other possibilities. And every time that you trigger one or to a certain degree, you enter that dreamland or this other space. And what we were interested here is like in sort of offering agency in one hand, but also allowing them to enter like these, I don't know, spaces of intimate and limitless at the same time. Then, and also the imaginary that we selected to create these dream landscapes, which we can talk afterwards maybe in more detail, where somehow we wanted to be filmic, that we wanted to be that you recognize it's not like something, you know, like out of the but there is something that is ordinary, but it has become like fantastical in a way, like, you know, it's full of like illusion, right? There is some illusionism in it, no? And that's the idea, because we were very interested in this dialogue with the notions of otherness, of hope and identity, of reality versus, you know, like altered states. Then, anyway, we want to...
So in each dream, you become something else. So you have a mirror image of yourself that is an avatar that represents something that is yourself. And the idea in each dream is that you have not just... It's not the idea of like having choices. You can go to option A or option B. The idea is like to become part of the installation, to have an involvement within the environment and be able to become this dream, become part of this dream.
Yeah.
So I think this is why we are going to show maybe a video of the
Yeah, and the piece, so to summarize, was inspired for us the idea of the lucid dreaming, which is this kind of in-between state where like you're questioning, is it real, is it not real, is it what I am, this is like a familiar territory or not, this idea of strangers between the real and unreal, the fiction versus then that was a little bit kind of like with our language that was like more poetic or more filmic. How can we bring that? Because I do think also that technology is giving us a lot of opportunities right now to break a little bit the change of the medium. Expanded cinema right now allows us to think about immersiveness and interactivity and new forms of storytelling. What I think at the very early stages of it, we have to find ways how can we, I don't know, create this dialogue and how we invite people also like to participate to watch, like, let's say the story or that we want to bring them, but that is not only in one directional, that something about their presence is relevant. Kind of inviting them that the piece would not be the same if they were not be there. Because some elements, in that case for us, was the visual elements would not exist. Then that for us was very important, and that was kind of like, but we wanted to show you that we had followed like kind of like a path, and that was like, you know, next step for us, and we're searching for these answers and new implementations and using them.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add one last thing about, because our pieces are heavily technological, especially when we're using interactivity. It's a humongous amount of programming. Actually, we have one of our programmers right here, is Jan Hauma, and it's very technological. But the idea is that when you enter the space, you're not wearing any technology, and so everything is really movement. Everything is triggered by your own self. It's not. And the technology is as much as possible invisible. So then you can really enter the magical space that we're proposing.
And also to wrap up, I mean, the first piece that we saw you, which is the name is Qualian. I don't know if we're familiar, but also was an element that we work, and that's why the latest piece is focused in this idea of qualia, which is like a raw feeling. Is this feeling that it's not, you cannot share, is unique, is in private, is impossible to share, because it's the first impression, the subjective the impression that you have of something. either the redness of red or the painfulness of pain. And this idea of like a sort of navigating this the experientiability, the feeling of something. And for example, in these installations, it's very important. It's like the emotional journey that you have, or how it relates to you, no? Because you have to do something. There is a part of you that has to take an active part, no?
Shall I play? I'm just so it's a 1 minute tip. If you haven't seen the piece, I don't know. Well, we'll see. Here we go.
You see more people interacting.
Thank you for these very interesting presentations. I have some questions for you. The first question is for the four of you. In classical cinema, the audience is just receiving the film. How do you think about the storytelling while the visitor or the audience is participating in it? Because there are some things that you decided. I visited the two pieces, and there are things that are decided by the artist, and other things that the visitor can do or not, and how do you think about the storytelling when you do that?
Okay, I can quickly answer. So I think, like we said, we kind of came from film, and so in many ways we have quite a classic idea of what is a story. There are only 7 stories in the world or whatever, and I think very early on we realized that branching narratives, like the idea that you choose this way or that way and that goes some way, wasn't really a very satisfying kind of where often when interactivity and story come together, that's what you get, and really, so probably the way that it's kind of constructed is it's very linear, but there's a shape to what the form is, almost like, there's some like, this is where we want people to consider and think about anticipation, or this is about fear of not knowing what happens next. And everybody has a different relationship with anticipation. Somebody will think it's very exciting, somebody will find that they're very anxious. So then we just have to think about, and this is where like testing is really useful, just to see. And often, that really changes. Things really change after you start putting people through it, like hugely. And you lose the control of a director of a film, because director of a film is kind of your job not to listen to the audience to some degree. And this is the opposite. If you don't listen to them, then you'll never have a conversation with them. And so it's about calibrating a kind of interaction which works for as many different kinds of people as possible, and they can each find, which is sometimes really subtle. Like there's one example, I'm just going to throw it out really quickly, but there was a piece that we did at the Tower of London in London. And the Tower of London, it's kind of a citadel of England. It's like the oldest place of power. It's where the Queen's jewels I guess they're still there. And it was a piece, it's also kind of where the secret services began in the UK. So it was a piece that was about surveillance. It's a good subject. And what we asked people to do was to meet outside, and then they get this audio narrative, and they're given this pack of things, and we tell them that there's this like a letter, and then they have to find a stranger in this very busy crowd, and you have to put the letter in the pocket or the bag of a stranger. Okay.
No.
So
Well, they don't just have to. Can you hear me? Is
yeah,
it-
yeah.
You don't just have to find a stranger. You have to decide who looks suspicious, and then you have to choose somebody, and you have to follow them for a small amount of time, and then you have to decide on the perfect moment to put the letter where you can on their body, whether it's their pocket or their bag.
And the idea, just really quickly, the idea is that you're, you know, the government has told you about this person needs to, you know, you're planting evidence, okay? And it's basically almost like you're just training to be a spy. So go on, sorry.
And so the audio is like, it's got sort of heartbeats under it, and it's like the woman is kind of speaking to you in this quite seductive but like quite forceful way. And then just right at the last minute, after she's been really pushing you, she says, okay, stand down, stop what you're doing, step away from the target and move to a secret place over there.
And so so the reason that we did that, we kind of, that whole thing, that sequence really evolved out of testing, you know. So the very first iteration, there was no real anxiety that we gave anybody, you know. We just kind of was trying to get them into the mindset of the spy, and so we were told it's a bit flat. And then
it was too safe, basically.
And then the second iteration, we were like, we're going to give them a letter, and they have to put the letter in somebody's bag. And then they were like, it's just too much, you know. And so then this evolved as like, you know, really imagine you're going to do it, try and do it. And then at the end, she just says, this is an exercise in learning to manage your anxiety, which is a key skill. So that's like a really specific example, but you know, it's actually, that's kind of the detail, that's like the material of the storytelling, you know, like where are you raising the stakes, where do they drop, where is it a moment? It's very much like editing a film.
For us, I would say that we're working in the area of the suspension of disbelief. I mean, we want, the idea is we're more sort of coming from the video art wall and the sort of visual poetry, and in that sense, we already are like at ease with not traditional storytelling. I mean, not having to have like a traditional plot or a linear plot. Then, in that sense, what we're aiming is that people, I don't know, like kind of, they enter also the world that we're proposing them, and they kind of, in a way, want to engage and experience that kind of journey. And the challenge for us was that still it's easier when you do that in a linear form, in the sense that you create like a piece that somehow has like, when you work at least in the interactivity, our challenge was how do we engage, how do we want people to participate, which kind of story or like dramaturgical or excuse can we find out, no? And for example, here we come up with the idea of sort of like an escape room. I mean, we kind of borrow this idea because we thought that that was a good way, it would make it easy for people sort of to understand that the kind of dialogue that we wanted to have with them. Because before we try other things, that's why I was talking about the idea of portal, because I think it's psychological, is an idea that we understand. It's like we're layering reality, we're creating a dialogue now between the fantastical and the real or the quotidian. But it's still, I think, I found it challenging. I think there's more and more we're going to be able to create, like, and to find more things that are going to help that dialogue, and that we're going to tell stories in a different way, and anyway.
And I mean, because the piece is interactive, we have been testing the piece before presenting it. And we have our own narrative in our own mind, but because it's interactive, we always kind of stay 1 week when we launch it, because precisely there's so much feedback that we get from what others experience, and therefore, because everyone gets their own journey at the end because of the interaction that they're having personally with the piece. And I think that kind of helped us to build even better the sense of explaining the piece.
Yeah.
Well, because there's a lot of relationships, no? Like the experience, how it affects you, because if you're more passive versus you're more active, you interact more, or like you're more an observer, or like, I don't know, like a lot of people, they tell you like they feel totally different things. I think that's fascinating in a way, no? Because it opens, interesting dialogue.
Can I add something as well?
Of course.
I think for me, when I think about cinema and about the moments when I watch a film where I feel a deep connection with a story that I'm witnessing, it's often because the film has enough space in it to allow me to be with it and to be in it and to allow myself to come out in this, if it's a cinema, in this dark room, you know. And when that piece of film is kind of really kind of ramming something down my throat, when it's like a piece of propaganda or it's very, very loud, I often withdraw and I can't bring myself to the table somehow. And so for us, when we started making interactive work instead of films, it was always a question of how do you really bring someone in, and how do you create space in which they can be themselves while they're doing this piece, and so therefore allow them to explore something about themselves through the doing of the piece. And what that evolved into was a style that we now realise is become quite a strong style, which has become quite natural to us, but it's about the way something often is written, that it's they're quite carefully scripted, and they're scripted in a very direct way. So in a lot of our work, there is someone and they speak to you, and they bring you in a very particular way, and they ask you particular questions, and those questions are often quite open questions. You know, they're not yes and no questions. They're kind of expansive, opening questions, and for me, that's the thing that has started to become interesting to me about how does the work ask questions of people. And it doesn't say like this is a thing and this is the answer. It says here is a situation, like what does it mean to you, and can you play with that in this context?
Yeah, actually, when I was visiting the Collider, I was thinking about cinema and media in general. And what you are saying is very interesting because this thematic of the cinema or media who are manipulating the audience and not giving them space to think about what they are seeing, or that they have in most of the time only the possibility to receive it, and sometimes it creates some kind of manipulation of the narrative, of history, of how you can see or understand the world. So can you talk much about this? How can your piece how can your piece make us think about cinema and media in general in that way of manipulation, propaganda?
So it's quite interesting, that question, because before me and Amy started working together, I spent about 9 or 10 years in a mixture of kind of news, documentary and current affairs, and it was really kind of in that time that I saw just how closed those spaces were. Even if every day the story changed, and they did change all of the time, you only ever heard one story. And I got to the point where, I'd go travel around the world, I'd make a documentary, and then the moment that it was like on TV, I never watch it, and I started realizing there was something about the medium, something about the screen, something about, the way that the audience was looking at somebody else's life and not really connecting the dots between it sounds a little bit cliche, but just between what you could learn from each other, the person in the story, the person on the couch. and I had this frustration because I realized, not only did I really kind of hate the language of news and current affairs, was that it was extremely hard to deconstruct. It was so rock solid that in order for people to think differently, to challenge the way that we've been basically, we've been entertained, but we have also been brainwashed. to even know that you can start changing that, to basically like stand up and say, okay, I got to go in now. You kind of have to be invited, you know, and the invitation is something that's really difficult to get right, because if I say, okay, now guys, we want to do a thing and you should come on the stage, you'll be like, no. What I want is to just, you talk and I'm sitting here. And so the actor kind of, it's so subtle, like I think genuinely, and there's something exciting for me that the younger generation are like interested in, you know, their stories are kind of made in Minecraft and they're in places where they are playing with it as well. But there's something about never having been invited to deconstruct the thing that we're being, even just without even thinking about what's on there, just the invitation for you to participate. Like sometimes, you know, Amy was talking about beyond the, you know, beyond the frame, the beginning, you know, like the very first piece that we did when people began the piece, because we really think about what are the contexts where you kind of stand back and you're like, oh, it's okay, you're in charge, you'll tell me what to do. And so this week, you know, people would begin and they would get a briefing, but it was an actor pretending to be another participant from the festival. And they would say, I just got told this thing, that this is what you're supposed to do, and you're going to have to tell the next person. Okay? And it's just a really subtle thing, so you don't feel like, oh, okay, this is the guy who's paid to do this. I don't really have to remember it. It's like, no, from the start, you're going to have to do this at the end, so you better kind of step up. Like, we need you here, not just like sleepy you. And there's just something, I think, in the kind of even invitation to do that, which is about, I don't know, something a little bit like we're changing. It's like the invention of the printing press. You know, you're changing, you know, there's this theory that the novel is how we started to have individualism and the idea that you could even have a life story. So, you know, what is happening in this medium? That's not a very direct answer to your question.
Can I answer?
The problem is I have so many questions,
Yeah.
but we don't
wow.
have time,
You go.
and we need to get some questions.
The microphone?
We're here in the
Here,
front
here.
row. Thank you.
Okay, first of all, thank you so much. And I have a question. Your ideas are really creative. Like, to be honest, I was asking myself, how did you brought those ideas? You took my mind from the Earth cinema to Mars cinema. Like, you really are,
Thank you.
you are really so creative. And I have a question. Is there a chance that you will bring this, or you'll conduct this kind of cinema here in Saudi Arabia? Really, we
Would
wish
love
it.
that.
Like, to be honest, I was watching and I was like, I wish to be there. And everything was amazing. So thank you so much. And again, I ask, is there a chance to bring it or to conduct it in Saudi Arabia?
Well, I
You
think we
can
would
see
love
some
it.
of the pieces here.
Yeah, that's true.
You can see some of the pieces here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dream-e-scape and the Collider. And for the other works, we are going to ask Livia, who is the curator of the event, to create more events.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the exhibition is until the 14th. So
Yeah, maybe you could do the Collider together tomorrow. You guys.
yeah.
Are you related?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
yes.
Yeah, do it. Other questions?
Hi. My question to Amy and May. It's a fantastic idea, but as a perspective view of script, screenplay, and direction, and the audience, how do you connect the points? For example, you write a script, and you make a screenplay, and you go into the scene as a direction, and finally as an audience. I have a different perspective of one region, another region has a different perspective, so how it is going to be connected?
Great question. So this piece started life as a game between May and I. We've got a video of it, but not on us, but I could show you another time. But where we were kind of playing with what it would mean for one person to have the headset and the other person to have the controllers. And we were looking for something that had metaphorical power to it, that felt like there was more than one layer present, and that we could kind of crack that open and explore it. And from that, we started to build a sort of a story world around that moment, where we were like, you know, what is this thing? And we kind of just brainstormed together about where are we? What is this thing? Is it a machine? We were both quite into science fiction, but not in a kind of space opera, crazy aliens way, more in a something is slightly strange going on here, and there's something about the strangeness of it that gives us a new gaze at what's going on between us in real life. And so then we would start writing, and so we would write things together, and then really, really early we would start putting these things together and testing them with people. And so it was this kind of process of develop the interactivity, develop the kind of thing that you were doing, write a little bit, put those things together, build something around those things, and then always kind of going back and forth, and mixing things around. So it's much more like cross-pollination. Does that translate? It's much more about these disciplines coming together and forming something new, rather than often in fiction film, you know, you write a perfect script, and then you take it to the storyboard, and then you do the storyboard. That it's really not that. It's a completely different process to that. And then that's, of course, before you've even presented it to a new audience. And the Collider has been to Amsterdam, New York, Qingdao in China, Venice, Brussels, and now Saudi Arabia. And so there are these very different communities of people who have tried it. And not only have they all come from all sorts of different places, but sometimes it's strangers, sometimes it's married people, sometimes it's colleagues, sometimes there's just many combinations. And to some degree, what we've done is we've made a set of conditions, and people respond to those conditions. And there's a lot in that we find very satisfying, you know, that it's like, oh, here they did this. Isn't that crazy? Or like, here they did this and it was really beautiful. And that multiplicity is beautiful. Like it makes the process like very interesting.
I mean, there is no standard
Absolutely
template.
not. Sorry. Yeah. I mean, I wish there was. It would make it easier.
We'd be much richer people.
Yeah.
Do we have other questions? Yeah. Thank you.
This question is for Isabelle and Laia. I'm wondering if you could speak about the way you came up with the piece, and if there were different iterations of it, and if it changed from different places that you exhibited at in the past compared to now.
Mm-hmm. One of the things also is that for us it was very important also the idea to have shared experiences. We were interested in exploring interactivity, but have like people sharing that, because so far the technology that has initially come up with interactivity is very isolated. It's about, you know, having the experience in your own sort of like. Then we wanted to, that's why we work more in extended reality. We wanted to really go out of that, make it really organic, really, you know, a place to be, you know, like where you can...
Yeah. So you can interact with the piece, but also with each other in
also,
the piece?
because we're very interested in the nature of belonging, and this is like a theme also that, then that's why we ended up sort of choosing that setup. Also, we're coming from this idea of video installation and video mapping, and we thought that creating a space that is private but is public, you know, that people can enter and then they can have a shared experience. They have their own particular qualia, but they have a shared experience that they can exchange and discover, you know, new ways that you can relate to like a visual material, no, to like these kind of fictional landscapes. And
I think Dreamscape is kind of part of our language, so it's been, when we worked with interactivity, we started working on, it first came, I think, from a tale that Laia knows about the 7 keys, and and we kind of build it with the dream world and how we would navigate this piece to change a little bit how the space responds to you with the doors. We had a previous piece in the same space in Los Angeles where we first built Dream-e-scape. So we had a piece before that was called Illusion. So the architecture of the space was identical, but all the content, the music, by the way, is composed by Nana Simopoulos, both pieces, the one that you saw at the beginning, the one that you saw at the end. And she created the music for the visuals. So it's really, everything is created for the piece, it's beautiful. But the process came from this idea of the dream walls and this escape room and the fact that we already had a physical space that we had created before to do this.
But I think going back to what the question and what you're asking, like for us the process is it has a lot of like different steps, in the creative process. Because first we start creating the visuals and as in a traditional way, as a film, or like we film, we tend to like all the cinematography is ours. Our main point of view is the cinematic element and the film and the language of film. Then we record, we shoot, we do the post-production, the editing. We work with our composer. We sort of like create as it would be in a traditional way. The only thing is that then we try to deconstruct that and then create environments or scenographic designs or conceptualizations of that material and how we're going to present it, how it's going to relate to the audience. And that's why we work a lot with the space, thinking in that kind of scenographic and dramaturgical element. Then Dream-e-scape, and after all this process, and then talking also with our interactive designer, figuring out how can it be done, because it's not the same to bring interactivity to computer-generated material or to like 3D assets than have to do it with real film. You want to create a dialogue with forms that are totally different, and they so far as today they don't talk that much. Then you have to create that dialogue a little bit, Then that's why our interactivity is not like the video game. It's not like fantastic. It's not. We're not trying to go there. We're trying to create like a more poetic relationship with all the abstraction and the feeling and the emotions that poetry takes. It's you try to put words to the what doesn't have words. Then we're leaning more to create emotions, basically.
But to come back to what you were saying, actually for Dream-e-scape we really storyboarded it. But instead of only the visuals, we were also storyboarding the interactivity and the music. So it was like multi-layered storyboarding. So
because if you look at our script, then the film is traditional. But the film, for example, has 12 tracks for the sound or the music, and then I don't know how many because everything is layered. Then it's almost like a spider web.
And then finally, to respond about what the space. So we're always after technology. We're looking forward to the next camera that will do an amazing motion tracking. We're after the next graphics card that is going to allow us to put more things together so we can actually expand the capabilities of the interactivity. Everything, we're always after so we are running after technology. So when we started, it was impossible to create a piece with two cameras connected to the same computer, so we had to network everything. It was very complex, and this iteration of Dream-e-scape is actually running from only one computer with the two cameras together, and therefore it's a much more seamless work. We have to thank John Howe for that. And that's basically every time that we create a new iteration of the piece, we're also working with the technology that finally we have access to be able to do it. So.
Thank you very much. Thank to the audience.